Welcome to Brooker Bonsai, and today we've got quite a special tree to go through. This tree is just your common juniper, but it's a tree that I've really enjoyed working on over the years. It's got a fantastic trunk with lots of movement, and today what we're going to be doing is some possible heavy bends to that trunk to continue to create more movement and more interest in the tree. We'll be doing some branch selection and some pruning and just some general maintenance to get this tree back on track. It was repotted 2 years in a row actually, and last year was the second year that I repotted it. So I've just left it kind of a little bit neglected in the bottom of the garden, and we can see we've got these really strong runners now that are starting to kind of come out. So there's a lot of cleanup that I need to do, lots of leaves. I can see there's lots of kind of snails and weeds all over the tree. And we can come in and begin to do some initial branch selection as well. You'll notice that the tree's got some interesting deadwood along the side here, so we need to come in and prepare that, put some lime sulfur. And late last year, I air layered off a big branch here into a clump style, which will be coming up in a future video. So what I will be keen to do today is, now that the tree has embedded itself in the pot, you can see when I wiggle it, it's pretty firm, so those roots are well established. I want to come in and just work this stump a little bit so that it doesn't look like a clean cut and looks a little bit more like the branch is broken off. I may also, depending on how we get on, start to work some gin into this bark itself. However, I'm conscious of not doing too much at once on this tree, so we may look at doing that next year. So let's zoom you in and take a 360 view look at this tree. So the front of the tree is kind of somewhere around here actually, but you can't really see much given all this really healthy, vigorous growth. You can also see at the back that we've got some mature foliage starting to form. When I pruned it really hard, we got all of this juvenile foliage, so it's good seeing that the tree is happy again and looking to kind of push out some more of this kind of fine scale foliage that we want to keep. With the pruning and the branch selection that we'll be doing today, we're potentially going to lose that. And it will revert back to this, but it's all part of the process. As the tree matures, it will slowly start kind of getting this more mature foliage as we move into the refinement stage. So here's the front of the tree. You can see loads of kind of weeds. Moving around to the side, we've got some really nice gin, and this is where you can start to see the movement in the trunk. How interesting that is. Coming round to the side, and then back round to the front. So as always, first things first, we want to just come in and remove all of these weeds, trying to get all the roots so that they don't grow back. Most of this is just grass, but we have quite a lot of debris that's on the surface of the soil. And this is because the tree's kind of at the back of the garden where it gets the most intense sunlight, which is what junipers like. But this time of year, when all the trees lose their leaves, it kind of becomes quite damp and wet around that end of the garden. So I'm just going to come in, and today we're going to move this tree, when we put it back out on the bench, into somewhere that's a bit more exposed. And hopefully that will ensure that the soil doesn't get too wet over winter. Doing this work is really important because not only does it give me an opportunity to examine the health of the tree, but also it ensures that we don't have any bugs that are overwintering in the soil that could impact the health of the tree. So depending on the branch structure today, I'm hoping we're not going to remove too much, and it's more just about setting branches and kind of branch selection, but we'll see what we think when we've kind of examined the tree properly. So like I said, you know, this tree is quite a special tree. It doesn't look like much at the moment, but I think it's one of the trees in my collection with the most amount of potential. Getting these kind of bends in a mature tree of this age, you know, you have to kind of start it off on its training, on its bonsai journey quite early. So I was really fortunate when I found this tree in the garden centre. It had a really nice kind of trunk, which I'll zoom in and show you now so you can see all the movement. So you can see here the trunk kind of comes up out of the soil and begins to slant. It initially then came towards us, and I removed this branch, and then it kind of bends back and heads back over. Because of the rapid growth this year, you can see all the bark is split, and it's created a really nice texture on the tree. And then it kind of continues to spiral round and then round to the front of the tree, where we have this kind of main branch kind of coming towards you here. So that's the tree now all cleaned up. There's quite a few of these like flower buds or seed pods kind of stuck in the branches, but I'm not too concerned that that's going to impact the health of the tree, so I can leave that. I will be removing a few branches today, so there's no point kind of cleaning up those branches if ultimately they're not going to remain on the tree. The next step when we're kind of trying to tackle something as kind of wild and bushy as this, it can feel quite overwhelming. So it's really important to just kind of stick to good processes and practices, and that will help us kind of begin to tackle the tree and its complexity. So the next step, now that the tree's cleaned up, is that I want to come in and do some initial branch selection. So kind of starting at the first branch, working my way up, looking at branches that are kind of facing in the right direction. If there are kind of multiple branches coming from one spot, I can kind of begin to remove those. And this will help me kind of clean the structure of the tree up, which I can then come back in shortly and begin to wire and pull the tree around. So we're coming up the trunk and we come to our first kind of branch here. You can see we've got an opportunity to prune it back. And moving up the trunk, we've got another branch here, which we can do the same, just tipping it. And as I said, you know, we've got so much here. You just got to slowly work our way up and kind of approach it systematically. So next we've got this, you know, really nice apex at the top that we can potentially bend, but we don't need this entire runner. So I'm just going to prune off the tip. I'm also just going to prune back some of these longer branches to make the crown just that little bit more compact. And that branch now is kind of pruned up. We've kind of simplified the structure, and that'll be ready for wiring. This branch here has 3 coming from one spot, so I'm just going to reduce that back and also do the same a bit higher up here. Not worrying too much about direction at this stage, because when we position the branch may be, you know, up, maybe down, etc. So we don't want to worry too much right now. Next is this bottom branch here. We've got quite a few growing tips that have died off, and a healthier one at the bottom. So I'm just going to prune back to it, but I think we'll probably, probably remove this branch. It's not adding to the tree's design in any way. Next, we're coming around to the side. We've got this branch here. And again, we're just going to prune it back to some healthy growth, and we'll wire that up later. Same with the branch above it, prune it back. And this is just helping us, rationale what's going on here. Oh, you got some really nice compact growth further in, so I'm going to prune that back to there. Coming around to the side here, we've got a few kind of inner weaker branches, so I'm just going to prune the tips off. And coming around to the side, you can see here we've got a nice branch that's relatively healthy. It's getting weak further back, so we just want to come in and prune off these tips back to, strong growth. Moving on to the next part of the tree, we've got this branch here. And again, we're just repeating the process, pruning off those tips. To encourage back budding. Junipers like this do respond, quite dramatically to a lot of pruning, which is why you can see most of the tree has got scale needle foliage, whereas those mature branches that I've taken off that were allowed to run, they begin to feature more of a mature kind of scale foliage. Got loads of branches coming from this one spot here, so I'm just going to simplify down to one and then prune off the tip. Coming further out onto the tree, I think, to be honest, we can take this whole end off. The tree's becoming quite long and we don't need that much foliage on the end. So that's the tree kind of a bit more pruned up. We've kind of come in and removed any clutter and multiple branches coming from one spot. We're now ready to begin wiring and putting in some heavy bends. So the first thing I want to do is just look at this trunk line and kind of think to myself, is this what I want? Does this match the design and the aesthetic of the tree, or do I need to change anything? And I think the reality is, this tree probably needs to be tilted about here, so that we can kind of remove this branch, and this will start to become the apex of the tree. So what I'm going to do is get a little block of wood or something and just wedge it underneath the tree so that I can remember the height and where I want to prune. So when I'm looking at it, I've got a sense of what that final design will look like. So here's an initial view now of that new front of the tree. You can see the trunk line is a lot more interesting, and it allows us to begin building those kind of primary branch structures that will form, the overall aesthetic of the tree. I quite like this position. It's definitely more appealing than kind of the flat one that I was kind of going off. But it does mean that kind of this back branch is quite long and might not now match the overall design of the tree. However, I think we just need to let the tree grow out and you know, flush out again with more growth, so we've got more choices for the future. But for now, it's yeah, it's starting to look good. The next thing I've noticed, given this change in tilt, is that this wood now here looks, you know, would kind of be in the soil line. The soil would kind of come up to here. So we'd need to look at kind of breaking this off as part of this gin work that we're going to do today. So the first thing I'm going to do is focus on this branch tip. I think we've got a good opportunity to actually gin this and remove that off and this inner growth. So I'm going to do that now. So creating gins are, you know, it's relatively easy. All you want to do is remove those kind of thin, skinny branches. Because once you begin to strip the bark off those branches, they become a bit redundant. So all I'm going to do is just remove any of those branch tips off, and then I'm going to come in with a knife and begin to remove that cadmium layer. And we'll probably still keep this branch. So all you do is you just come in with a sharp knife and begin to, you know, peel off the bark and ring it. You can, you know, crush the bark, and that does allow you to peel it off as well quite easily. But the trick with any kind of ginning is that you do this before the branch has time to die, because once that cadmium dies, it becomes very difficult to remove it from the trunk of the tree. So you can see here, you know, I'm just running the knife along the bark, and that just peels it off quite nicely. You can also, you know, pull a little bit off and peel it as well, and that does create for, you know, quite a nice natural look. This time of year is the best time to be creating gins. All the sap flow has gone into the roots and as the tree's in hibernation, so you don't get any bleeding. The tree has, you know, a chance to heal over winter, so that kind of area where the bark ends closer down to the branch, that can kind of seal up. And then when spring comes in, because that's already healed, you don't get as much you know, bleeding or kind of sap flowing through there. So it's important that you do it kind of early enough in winter to give the tree a chance. Now the last thing to do on a gin is to make sure that the end doesn't have this kind of sharp cut off, and this allows it to look a lot more natural. So you just want to come in with a pair of pliers or pruners like this and just snap it, pull it around a bit, and it just gives it a bit more authenticness. Next we're going to focus on this gin here. In this new planting angle it's too long, so we need to prune it back, and just going to come in and, similar to the above one, just kind of snap it off, pull it back, and you know, make it look a little bit more believable. Next step is to look at this connection here. Probably most of this has died off, so I'm going to kind of create a gin here and work on this spot. So just like the other one, you know, I create a ring, and you can see here that this wood has died, so it's much harder to to peel back, unlike the other one above. And you'll notice that the bark is quite a dark brown. It's also quite hard to do and give you all a nice view of what I'm doing without my hands getting in the way. It is quite fiddly, so apologies if this doesn't look as good on camera. I'm just going to continue to work this back until we hit live green tissue. There's no point having all this dead bark on the tree, and how the tree's died back will make it looks really nice and natural. That this branch has kind of died off at some point and the tree's healed around it. So we can see there's a lot of dieback on here. So I'm going to continue to peel back until we've found where the tree is alive. So I found some live vein here now around the collar, which is good. So I can use that as my as my starting point for the gin. And what that'll allow the tree to do is then roll around the cut point. And it will begin to look, really nice. You can see how, with junipers, it's not really green. It's this kind of, nice kind of red color, which can make it a bit tricky, trying to find where the live vein is, but we've got there. So that's the side done. I think we've got a similar one here. I'm actually going to lower this down because it gives me a better opportunity to see. If we lift this up, I'm just doing the same now on the bottom, chipping away at the wood until I find that nice kind of red live vein. So that's that gin now created. What I want to try and do is begin to chew back this stump so it doesn't look like it's been sawn off. So with this being really tough wood, I'm just holding the tree so that we don't disturb the roots too much. So that's the gins now all complete. You can see we've kind of tried to make it look as realistic as we can by breaking the stubs back and revealing some of these live veins that will heal and then begin to roll. The next thing we want to do is come in with some lime sulfur. This is the one that I use. It's lasted me quite a while. Now with lime sulphur, you are supposed to mix it with water, because this is a quite a concentrate solution. However, the amount I need to do, if I mix this with water, I'd end up with just too much. So all I do is I just stick the brush in and just lime sulphur up the tree, working it into all those areas that I've revealed from this gin work. And what that will do is that will preserve the wood against the water and the rain. At the moment it's quite yellow, but you'll find that as it dries it turns white. And this whiteness is quite nice because where junipers are from, like the Sierra Nevada desert, the sun actually bleaches the gins and the exposed wood, and it turns it all white. So this lime sulphur process kind of makes it look quite natural. Might not be what we're used to in the UK because we don't get enough sun to kind of bleach our trunks. But for a tree like a juniper, it does make it look really natural. So now that we've got the tree pruned up and ginned, it's time to come in and do that wiring and some of that trunk bending. So first I'm going to reset the tilt and the angle of the tree so that it's facing the direction that we want, and then we'll begin kind of putting some more interest into this part of the tree. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to bend and wire this main trunk here. To do this, I'll need some raffia, which is kind of like a straw material, as well as some thick wires to help support the bend. So for the raffia, what you want to do is you want to fill up a bucket of water and soak the raffia for about 20 minutes. So I'll show you how I do that now. So here's the raffia that I'll be using today. As you can see, it's quite straw-like. What this allows us to do is create really nice, strong tension around the branch, and it supports the branch and braces it so that as you begin to bend it, you reduce the risk of it snapping. It supports it, so it will then also hold it in place with some of the wires that we'll add shortly after. So I'm going to take a little bit of this now and show you the next step. We need about this much. You can see it's quite long, and all we're going to do is at the top of the thing just tie it in a knot. Like that. Tidy up the edge. And just kind of run our hands through to make sure we've not got anything else in here that isn't connected to it. And then we're just going to roll this up into a ball and place it in a bucket of water and let it soak for around 20 minutes. So 20 minutes has passed now, and we can begin raffiaing up this trunk. So I'm just going to take the raffia out of the bucket and just squeeze out the excess water. And now it's time to begin wrapping it around the trunk. So the first step, you want to tuck the end of the wire in, the raffia even, into the trunk like that, so that as you pull the raffia around, it holds it all in place. For this to work, you have to create a lot of tension in the raffia so that it's nice and tight. Because any kind of looseness or slack in the raffia will mean that it won't kind of hold as well and provide that support that we need from the trunk. So that's the raffia now all locked in. We can begin working our way around and up the branch. Want to make sure that all the bark is covered by the raffia so that when we put the wire on, it doesn't cause any marks. And you can see how tight that I'm pulling it. So now we've got that raffiaed up, we just want to tie it off. So to do that, we split the raffia in half. Twist it like this so that it goes in opposite directions. And just loop this under. And then we can come in and tie it off. Before finally just tidying up those ends. So step one is complete, it's all raffiaed up. We now want to get some wire, some really thick wire, so that we can begin bending it down and create a bit more movement in the trunk. We've got this nice thick black wire, and what I want to do is, as I'm wiring up this branch, I want to wire it the way in which I'll bend it. So my first bend is, which will be the biggest bend, is to push it down this way. So as I kind of wire the branch up, I want to make sure the wire kind of loops around so that the wire faces the same way. And this will mean that as I twist the wire, it will grip the branch and hold it in place. If I wired it the other way around, as I bent it, it would actually create slack and then it wouldn't hold it in place at all. So when you're wiring your trees, that's always a really important thing to remember. So I've anchored that wire in now along the main trunk and on the nook of this ginned branch, and that will really hold it in place. So I can now begin wiring the branch normally. With it being such a thick branch, this will need a couple of wires to give it that extra strength to hold it in place. You'll notice as I begin to wire the tree that the path the wire takes runs alongside in line with the previous wire. And this just ensures that the wires are working together and that the force is facing the right direction. If there was too much of a gap, like you can see here, they tend to work as a spring and push off against each other. So whenever I'm wiring, I need to make sure that these wires are really flush against each other. So you can see that there. So I've just given that a test and the branch springs back into place still. So I probably need another wire and then a guide wire to hold it in place. And this is just another piece of wire that creates a bit of tension so that you have the wires along the trunk bracing and creating that support, and then the guide wire kind of providing that downward tension. Just gonna bend the branch down and wire it in place. To protect the trunk, I'm just going to use a tube of bicycle tube, inner tubing, and that can be placed along the branch, and it just stops the wire from kind of biting in as I bend it down. So here's a close-up now. You can see how the tubing just protects the trunk. So now that we've got that that branch all kind of bent and ready in place, we can now begin to look at some of our other branches and place them on the tree. So for this we can get away with using much thinner wire. There are some branches like this one here that just are a bit too weak to wire at the moment. And if we did wire it, we would run the risk of killing it off, so I want to leave that one. And we're just following similar principles to the big trunk of wrapping the wire around the branch. We do have the added benefit with these smaller ones that because they're so small, direction doesn't matter too much at this stage. But we do want to make sure that you know, everything's facing in the right direction and we're not kind of damaging any buds. So you can see I've wired this branch and kind of gone around the back and wired that one there. So we're wiring kind of two branches at the same time. This is the front of the tree. We want some kind of branch to come around here, begin acting as our kind of side branch there. So again, we've got all of these long branches at the top which we can't wire at the moment. They're too weak, we'll run the risk of killing it. So we're going to come round to our side branches here, which now we've got a set angle for the tree. We can actually remove this inner branch. And we want to look at wiring this branch up now. So again, we're going to use the same method as before, where we anchor it to one and then wire another branch. So we're only using one wire to kind of wire two branches, and that makes sure that we don't kind of overwire and that our trunk remains relatively clean. So we're just adding a nice bit of movement into that branch, and then probably next year we can kind of begin to reduce it back a little bit more. Get the other side now that we wired, just want to do the same thing. It's quite vertical, so we can definitely kind of angle it so these branches start growing a bit more, and just creating a bit more movement and interest. Probably reduce this back next year, but for now we just want to add a little bit of movement and get them facing the right direction. So we've got a couple more branches that we need to wire. This one here is fine, we can let that grow. And these three just need a little bit more attention. We've got actually a bar branch there, so on reflection, it looks like this one actually needs to go, so we don't get swelling in the trunk. So it's just these last two that need pruning. We've got a nice kind of branch up here, and I'm actually going to remove the lower one so that we've got a bit more taper on that branch. So let's get them wired up. We have to be very careful with these from here onwards, with them being so thin. It's easy for them to die back under too much pressure. So we're just going to bring this up. So we've got a bit more foliage kind of around this area. And again, we'll probably remove that tip. And with this one here, just going to give it a bit of movement. I'm not really sure what we're going to do with that just yet. The last bit we're going to wire today is this one here. We need to be really careful, but I want to kind of direct this leader kind of across the main trunk at the front to give us a bit more foliage at the front. The trunk is just looking a little bit exposed at the moment. So you'll see that I kind of wrap it tightly around the wood, and then very loosely around the green foliage, so that it's mainly just kind of holding it in place and guiding it. So that's the pruning all done. I'm going to mark the front of the tree with that wire. We've removed quite a lot today, but I'm really pleased with the branch structure that we've set up now. We've kind of started to create more bends. We've fixed some of the the kind of the long branches, and as well as the gins from the last air layer. And we've managed to close the gap between this trunk here and here, and this will make the tree look a lot more compact. We've changed the planting angle ever so slightly, and this now brings us kind of a new apex that we can begin playing with later. Let's take a look at how much we've taken off the tree today. So you can see here we've taken off a lot of foliage and some quite thick branches. If we were to do this in summer, you could probably root these, but with it being winter time, particularly this one because it's got a runner on it, they're unlikely to develop and to root. So I'm just giving it a spray down now with some rose clear, and this will make sure that any kind of insects that are kind of hibernating in the soil are killed and on the tree. This is the rose clear that I use. I get a few questions on that one. It's really good stuff. So the tree doesn't look like much at the moment. A little bit of a Frankenstein with all the wire and kind of the bare branches in place. But we've set up those pads and that structure now. So it needs to go back out on the bench and flush out. Probably late spring, I'll remove a lot of these wires, except for potentially the trunk. And this will make sure that the wires don't bite in and cause scarring on the trunk. The last thing we want to do is to spend years developing a really nice tree using clip and grow and some basic wiring to then end up ruining the design because we've left the wire on and it's bitten in. So let's zoom you in and take a 360 view look at the tree now. So it's a little bit hard to see the final design on the camera, but hopefully this gives you a sense of some of the structure that we've begun to place in today. So here's the front of the tree, coming around to the side, to the back of the tree, to the side, and back round to the front. So that's all the work for the tree today. If you've made it this far, don't forget to give us a like and drop us a comment. I do try to respond to them when I can. And if you enjoyed this content as much as I've enjoyed making it, there's a subscribe button in the bottom corner of the screen. So look forward to seeing you in the next one.